Hi, welcome everybody to Microsoft 365 virtual conference. We have a session from Toni Pohl. Toni will be talking about master PowerShell with Azure Automation Accounts. Take it away, Toni.
Great, thanks. So welcome to my session about mastering PowerShell with Azure Automation Accounts. So in the next hour, I want to show you how you can automate your processes with PowerShell and with Azure Automation Accounts. My name is Toni Pohl. I'm an MVP from Austria. I'm living in Vienna, and I'm happy to be part of the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. So with that, let's start here. First, we have a message from our organizer. So the SharePoint conference that was intended to happen this March is now moved to next year, and the new name is the Microsoft 365 conference. So keep that in mind. There will be a lot of interesting sessions, hopefully in person then. The second thing, thanks to our sponsors who make this event possible. So check them out afterwards. And I want to point out that there's a raffle, so you can take part of that and win cool prizes here. And the last part here is if you want to donate for charity, please follow these links here. Okay, with that, let's start with my session, PowerShell with Azure Automation Accounts. And there are multiple ways how you can automate your common tasks in Microsoft 365. So I've listed some of these possibilities here. So one thing to automate would be, for example, with Azure Logic Apps or with Microsoft Flow, now known as Power Automate. The second thing, of course, are automation accounts. If you already have PowerShell scripts in place, it's a very easy task to migrate them to Azure Automation Accounts. This is what I want to show you in this session here. Of course, there are other methods like using Azure Function. This is more for the developers, but you could also use PowerShell scripts in your Azure Function as well. There are some benefits and some downsides. Maybe we talk about a little bit about that at the end. And of course, you can develop your own APIs doing some tasks or any other kind of functionality you want to host in Azure or somewhere else. So in this session, I'm concentrating on Azure Automation Accounts. So what is it? How does it look like? I've taken this one sentence here on this almost last slide I have. The rest is demo because it helps administrators to simplify their tasks by running their scripts in an Azure host. And the benefit here is that it's a central place. You can give permissions to that. You have a very controlled environment for all the modules you are using, and we have logging and so on. So once you have set up your automation account, you can use it for your all your daily tasks you want to execute automatically. So with that, usually you have your automation accounts or your scripts in Visual Studio Code, for example. You run them locally or on a local server. And now our task is how we can bring that to Microsoft Azure. So I think this is my last slide here. It's useful for schedules. So if you say, I have a script that runs every midnight and does something, collect data from my Office 365 tenant, for example, writes that to an Azure storage, creates a Power BI, something like this. You can use it, of course, for workflows. I have a very nice demo for that. And you can use it for other purposes as well. So the idea here is automate as much as possible in your Office 365 environment. So with that, let's have a look how these Azure Automation accounts look like. I'm already authenticated to an Azure demo tenant here. And you can create a new automation account very easily. So simply search for automation accounts. Then you land on this page here, go to add and say, I want to create such a new environment here. You just have to enter a name. So I call this M365 Virtual Marathon, for example. My subscription, a resource group, I already have one. I put it in my global Azure here, my location. And there's one interesting and important thing you need to take care of. That's create run as account. So this is the identity that will be created to execute your scripts. So by default, this is switched to yes. So we leave it here, but we will have a look at that a little bit later. So let's create that automation account environment first. This is usually taking maybe a minute or so, and once this environment is created, you can see the deployment is in progress here on the right side. You can use it. I already have created one here. It's called Global Azure 1, and here you can see what kind of scripts we have in here. So it's already provisioned. So maybe have a look how this new Azure Automation account looks like. M365 Virtual and Virtual Marathon. And here you have a menu with various functionality. So the most important part are the runbooks. By default, you get 3 runbooks out of the box, and these runbooks show you how you can work with these runbooks with your script. So a script is a runbook. That's the name how it's called here. And you can create a new runbook and say that's my Hello World, for example. And then you can see what kind of runbook types we have. So we have PowerShell, which is the most common way in most cases. We have Python 2, but that's only an older version that is supported here. And we have graphical PowerShell script or graphical scripts. We will have a look at that. But first, for the first attempt, I open the PowerShell and say my Hello World shall run in an Azure host. And now I have this new runbook here, and here I can start coding. So if I go to my Visual Studio here and I say, okay, that's my first demo, write output. How does it look like? I simply paste it in here and say, that's my script. I can save it, I can test it, and I can publish it. And the difference between the test pane and publish is, test pane is just if you want to try it out, how does it perform in my virtual machine? So it will be deployed to a virtual machine, and once this is deployed, the PowerShell script will run. So this doesn't create a job, which is the difference between the publishing. So once you publish a script, you have it available for other actions like calling it from a webhook or from a schedule, for example. So you see it takes a moment to spin up that virtual machine to deploy that script into that machine. And once this is done, we will see this Hello World here. So this isn't maybe not the fastest one, but it will show up hopefully in a minute. So this is queued right now. And yeah, we should see an output sooner or later. Let me in the meantime go duplicate my browser here, go to my other existing Global Azure Runbooks, which is here in my automation accounts. What can we do here? I've already imported some scripts, so you can create it manually, or you can also import these runbooks. So I first created this runbook and copy and paste from my Visual Studio Code, but you also can go to import runbook, say select a file, and then go to this file here and say I want to import it, and this would be the other process. Of course, what you also can do to import your scripts in such an automation account here, you can combine it with where is it, somewhere here, source control. So for example, you can check in your code to a repository and then bind that repository to that runbook, so that once you commit your changes to that repository, the Global Azure Runbooks takes the content from that repository and puts it in here. So that would be the fully automated way. Okay, so I have a Hello World script here, which is actually the same what I copied before, and you can start it anytime. And here you can see recent jobs. I already did execute it some time ago. And if you run it, if you publish it and you run it here, it's scheduled as a job. So currently I clicked on the start button, and here I would see the output of that script here. And I can click refresh from time to time to see, okay, what is happening in that virtual machine? How far did it go? How much did execute from my code? And I also would see any errors that occur in my script or any warnings. And again, it's locked, and I get exceptions here. So that's the basic functionality we have here in these runbooks. Let me go to the slides for a second, just to show you the principle here. So we have an automation account, that's our environment. We have runbooks, so every script is a runbook here. So one automation account can contain multiple runbooks, multiple scripts. And we have benefits like we can share information we use in all the scripts, like for example, variables, or what's very helpful is credentials. So I log into Office 365 with, let's say, an administrator account, or with a specific connection. I connect to a SQL database, to a Azure storage table, and so on. And everything this combined here will be deployed once you click on the start button to a virtual machine, and it is executed in there. So that's the basic idea of these runbooks. Let me click refresh in the meantime. Let's see if this already did run. Well, it takes a longer time, obviously, so nothing happened. Now it's completed. So now I see this hello world at the current time here. So this is how the handling here works. Let's have a look at the existing runbooks. There is a Graphically Run Book, just to show you that for a moment here. A Graphically Run Book is not a script, but it allows you to use specific components here, like, for example, other runbooks or commandlets that are predefined. For example, I want to access an Azure storage table, or I want to start a virtual machine or something like this. So I can search here and say, okay, I know there's a module for, let's say, Azure storage here. So I can open that and say, I want to get a blob storage here. So I would go here and say, add to canvas. And this here will be added here. And now I can more or less do a graphical scripting and say, okay, the README here points to that one. And after this, I want to do that operation. And what happens in that script here, in that, let's say, object, I would define the properties. So that's also a possibility. From my perspective, I usually don't recommend it because it's very hard to maintain, and usually you're much faster with PowerShell. So just that you know that you can also use these graphical runbooks for specific purposes, for simple tasks. That's also a very good option to try it out. Okay, so let's go back to our other runbook. So I'm currently in this Global Azure One runbook. What else can we do? We can use variables, for example. So if I have multiple scripts, PowerShell scripts here, and I want to use the same data many times, I can simply go add these assets here by clicking on that. So for example, I've created a variable, SumText1, so I can simply go in here and say, add it to the canvas here. And it will be added, let's do it here, add variable to canvas. And I get the code for how I would access that variable. And if I look back here to my runbooks, I simply leave it as it is. You can see I have runbooks like my name or my company, or name one, get automation, SumText1, SumText2. I already have defined them here, and you would do that here in the shared resources. So I have the variables here. So you can simply define a new variable, say that's my test, and this is of type string or Boolean or something like this, and this is my value, and it's encrypted or stored or not. Of course, you can also use Azure Key Vault if you want to. That would be an extra, let's say, call to Azure to get that tokens. But now we simply concentrate on using the environment variables here, so we can access that. And I've also added credentials for the administrator of that tenant, and let's say for Nestor, for example. So I use these data here in that script variables. And if I go to edit, you can see this is how I access this data. So I simply get it and they say output. I also added some parameters here, just that you see how this would look like. And now let me start that script here, that you see the behavior. If you have defined parameters, let's say my name is M365 Virtual Marathon, and my company, I leave it as it is with the default parameters. And I've now started that script here, and with these parameters, and it will use these variables and do something with that data. So that's a very useful way how you can use the same information in multiple scripts from a very easy and safe way. So let's click on refresh. Let's see how this goes here. Again, this needs to be deployed to the machine, and it will happen sooner or later. In the meantime, let's go back to my other automation accounts. Go back to Global Azure here. What else can you do? You see as job statistics, how many scripts have been completed, how many have been failed, how many have stopped, and so on, how many are still in the queue. And you can also schedule these runbooks. So if you say, okay, this Hello World here, for example, I want to run this automatically at specific times, you can simply add a schedule here. So if I go to link to schedule, and I say I want to create a new schedule, and let's say let's do it daily, and I want to do it recurring every day, set expiration, it runs only till beginning of June, and run this, or let's create this schedule. And then of course I can also add parameters if there are parameters in the script. And if I schedule this here, it will run at these times automatically. And the second thing that's also very helpful here is that I can add a webhook to that script here and say, I want to call that script from another environment. So let's say, for example, I have a flow, and the flow shall provision a new team site. And I want to use that flow with an approval process from a manager. How could I use that script? I could add a webhook here, and I can create a webhook, give that a name. So run me, something like this. And then I get a URL. That URL here is, I only get it here at the time when I create that webhook here. So that's more or less the code that allows me to execute it. And then I can go to my local machine, for example, to a flow and simply use that URL and say, I want to call that script within that workflow. And that's a very useful construct we can use here. Again, if you create a webhook and I click OK, the webhook is gone here. So if I click create and I go to the webhooks of that script here, so let's have a look here. You can see here's the webhook I defined here, but if I click on it, I don't get the URL again. So you really have to copy that URL when you create the webhook. And it's only valid in that case till the 28th of May, for example. Okay, so now in the meantime, my script did run. You can see there have not been errors, and it really says these are the parameters I was asked for, and this is the value of the variables which I used to read in the script here. Okay, so actually these are the only things you need to change when you migrate your Office 365 or your scripts, your PowerShell scripts to an Azure Automation account. I would recommend to put credentials in that automation account. I would recommend to put any information using multiple scripts here in the shared resources, which are here in the account. Oops. Here somewhere in the credentials connection certificate. So you can also use certificates if you connect to other resources and so on. The next part that's important here when working with the automation accounts are the modules. So modules are the way how you can use multiple PowerShell modules from various sources. That can be the PowerShell gallery, that can be your own PowerShell modules you compile and upload, and you upload them to this environment, to the automation accounts. So you can see I already have included a bunch of PowerShell modules, like for example, I added Microsoft Graph, and I added, which I will use in my demo here, the Microsoft Online SharePoint PowerShell. We are here at the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon, so it makes sense that we do something related with Microsoft 365 and so on. So also I want to access Azure Storage, for example, and you can see the old Azure modules, which are the Azure RM modules, and I also have integrated the new ones, the AZ PowerShell modules. Saying this, let's have a look back. Let me refresh that. There should be our M365 Virtual Marathon automation account. If I look in here and look what modules do I have out of the box, and I click modules here, you see I have already a lot of modules registered, but there's an important thing to notice here. You see the versions here. So for example, Azure Storage, I have version 1. For computer management, I have version 4. or 5, Microsoft PowerShell Core, I have version 0.0 and so on. So this is very important. Once you created an automation account, you should update your modules so that you ensure that you're working with the latest version of the modules. So how can you do this? Well, there's a cool menu here that's saying update Azure modules. So if I click on that, you will see, okay, this has been deprecated. There's another method you should use now, and Microsoft makes it a little bit complicated to follow that. So you have to go to that GitHub repository to update your modules. Then you land here, and here's a script that's called update automation Azure modules. So you would click on that here, go to the raw mode, and this script here updates the modules in the Azure automation account. Simply copy that full code here. There's no need to really read it or understand it. Go back, create a new runbook here. I do it here, say that update modules, for example, runbook type, this is PowerShell, create it, and paste that PowerShell code in here. So this is what I do here, publish that. And now you would run this update modules script, and the benefit why Microsoft has chosen to go this path is because now you can create a schedule and say, I'm self-responsible for when I update modules. If I want to really update them, I do it on a monthly basis. So I would simply create a schedule for that and say, okay, every month on the 1st, for example, I take care that my automation account updates the modules here. How does it work? Well, I have to add the resource name, but currently I'm here. So this is my resource group. So I have to paste in that parameter. And here's the automation account name. And if you don't add any automation account, any PowerShell module name, it uses Azure RM. So if you want to update the PowerShell AZ modules, you would type in AZ and then say OK. So now this script here will run, and it will update sooner or later the modules in that automation account. So again, currently we have modules like 1.1.1, 1.2 for Azure RM Compute. If I now go back to my other automation account, to my Global Azure 1, where I have my scripts and I look at the modules here, we should see that we have different versions, which much newer versions, and this has been updated with this update module script here. So this is very important to ensure why is something not working, to see what kind of modules we have included in this automation account. Okay, so this is more or less the tools that we need to know when working with these automation accounts. So we have seen we have a lot of runbooks here. We also see a history for every script we have, for every runbook. How is it in publish mode? Is it in edit mode? If I want to store data, usually I run a script on my local machine, and maybe I have an output that generates a log file or something like this. How would it work in Azure Runbooks? Because the code is deployed in a virtual machine somewhere, and the virtual machine is deleted after the code has been executed. So you need to store that log information you want to work with later, to process that later in some kind of storage. And what's very helpful for that is an Azure storage account. And how can you use that? I have a sample script here. So in that case, for example, I use a storage account name that's named Global Azure 1. And here I connect to my Azure Automation account to have access to that automation, to that storage. And now we come back to the service account that has been created when we created the automation account. So let's go to our Azure Active Directory here and have a look at the applications that have been registered. And look at all applications here. So we call it M365 something. And here's the automation account that has been created when I created that new automation account. And if I look, the name is M365 virtual machine and then some random name here. So, and the thing to notice here is if I go to the subscriptions and go into my subscription, I have only one here, and I go to the access control, we will see that for the role assignments, that account here it is, M365 virtual machine, is contributed for the full subscription. So that's beneficial on the one side because I can now access from my PowerShell script every resource that's living in that Azure subscription. The downside here is that maybe I don't want to have that, any script to be able to, let's say, delete a virtual machine or something like this. So my recommendation would be in production environments, remove that permission here of that automation account, go to the automation account and restrict that account only to have access to that resource group by simply doing this here and say, okay, I want to add that. And here it's inherited, but if I would remove it from the subscription level, I would then add it here as for that resource group. So that would be the recommendation. And this is the reason, if I switch back now to my other runbook here, why I can use that automation account and connect to Azure with that authentication and do something in that subscription. In my case, it's beneficial because I want to access that storage name here, this one, the Global Azure 1. So let's go to that storage account, which I already created. Of course, I could create it automatically as well. Here's Global Azure 1. Storage Explorer, we want to write something in that storage here. So our logs, what we produce, and I have already created a container that's called my log files here. And here you can see there are currently 3 files in that. So what am I doing here? So I simply create a new log file. I say, I create a log file with the date, and then I have a loop here and say, I want to create 5 lines. I simply write that log file to the local virtual machine, to the current folder where the script is executed in my, let's say, sandbox. So, and after I've done that, I need to transfer that script file or that log file to my storage account to have it in a permanent storage. And this is how I do it here. I say I want to get that storage account here in the context, and this is where we do the action. We say, okay, please copy that file here to that storage. So let's run this here. You see, I already tried it a couple of times here. So again, this will take maybe 1 or 2 minutes. At the end, we should see once this script did run, that we should have another new log file in here with some content. So this is how you would act to have your own storage with output that your script generates. In the meantime, let's have a look at start or stop virtual machines. So for example, you can use these PowerShell Run Books to, let's say, automatically start or stop a virtual machine. This is how this would look like. Again, we are using that automation account to have access to that. And then we simply say, oh, I want to start the virtual machine with that command here in that resource group, and that's it. Or if I want to stop it, that would be the other way around. So for example, I create a schedule and say, I want to shut down my virtual machine every day at 6 o'clock, which doesn't make that much sense because that's already available in the virtual machine properties, but you could do other things as well, or provision a new machine. So everything you can do with PowerShell, you can do in the Azure Automation account as well. Let's have a look here how our script is doing. So let me refresh that here. Oh, here it is. Obviously, our script did run. So this was the last one, the last log file that has been generated by our script. And if I look into that file here, which I opened it here in my notepad. This is what we just produced, what this script here did. So just to show you the process, how you can work with that logging data and store it in a permanent way. Okay, so let's go back to our other run books here. So now there comes an interesting part. I have still some minutes left where I can show some cool demos. You can use, of course, PowerShell modules from other vendors or from Microsoft. So there are some cool functionality you can use, for example, for creating a communication site, a SharePoint site. In that case, I'm using the Microsoft SharePoint library, and I want to use that in my script. And you can see what I'm doing here. I have some parameters asking, okay, what's the name of the new communication site you want to create? I need to get the tenant. So for that, I use the automation variable, which I have stored in my automation account credentials, because I need to pass that. And of course, I need credentials. So the credentials for that must be a user that has the permission to create such a site. In my case, I use a user named Nestor Wilke, and he is a global administrator. He has the permissions to do that. So I connect to the SharePoint service of that tenant. You can see tenant admin SharePoint.com with these credentials here. And then I say, I want to create a new SharePoint site with the template SDS3 with that owner, with that site URL, and with that quota. And I ask for that quota here in the parameters. And more or less, that's it. So let me run that here. Start. Let's say that's my project 20. My gigabyte quota shall be 5 GB, and I leave the administrator as owner. So let's start that runbook here. So this will take maybe three to 5 minutes or so. In the meantime, I have opened the SharePoint site here just to show you how it looks like now. So I have tested it with project 12 and project 13, for example. So these are the current SharePoint sites. And what I get here is a newly provisioned site, in that case, which looks like here. So this is the intention of that script here. The benefit here again is I can call that here from a webhook. So if I go to my other runbooks here, I've created the same script here with a webhook. And this is exactly the same thing. The only thing that's different is that I'm asking for parameters in a different way. I say, I want to get that data here from, I get an object, and then I simply look, did I get an object here? And if yes, I convert it from JSON to my variables here, and then I do the same thing here. And the webhook here for that script, create site webhook, is integrated in a flow. So if I have a look at the webhooks here, this is the webhook I already defined some weeks ago, obviously. And let's go to my logic apps. I think I've created a logic app for that, which is approval site, this here. And let's have a look what it does. So it looks at a SharePoint list here. And the SharePoint site address is sites ignite. The list name is sites every 30 seconds. We want to have an approval. Somebody wants to create a new site. In that case, it goes to the administrator and says, please approve this site. Somebody wanted to have this site. And then I look, has it been approved then? And now comes the interesting part. Here's the webhook for that PowerShell script, which I created before, and say, I want to have an owner, I want to have the quota, and I want to have the title. And once this is done, I send an email, okay, this is your new communication site. So let's try it out. Here's my Ignite site. Here's my list site. And let's create a new project here. I've used Power Apps to make it a little bit more colorful. So project 365 virtual marathon, for example, my quota shall be 6 GB, and save this. Okay, I've now created this new item here in SharePoint. And if I look back to my logic apps, let's have a look at the runs here. We should see that a new run will be starting in the next 30 seconds or so. That's the refresh rate I'm using here. So here it is, it's running. And it's currently in the step that it sends an approval to the administrator here. And you can see I already got an email here because it's open, send an approval made. It's the step where I'm currently. So here's my approval request for my project 365 virtual marathon. And I get it 2 times as an adaptive card as an HTML. We can configure that. In my case, I simply click approve here. And now this logic app should continue with the condition. So the manager approved this, and you can see it went that way here, that path that we say, okay, we called that endpoint here with this data here with the quota of 6 and the title of project 365 virtual machine. So the work is already delegated to our automation account, and we should also get an email notification saying that this has been created. In the meantime, if I look at the jobs here, we should see that there's this script here is currently still running. We called it from the automation, from the logic app here. So it will take its time. Maybe it will be done in 2 or 3 minutes or so. And once this is done, we should get this new communication side. In the meantime, let's have a look, because I started the other script before as well. It was project 15, which I created. Let's have a look if this already has been provisioned here. Obviously not. So depending on the speed of the PowerShell and the tenant here, we will see that these, this one was already created. The project 15 obviously still takes time, but this from the logic app has been created. So let's have a look at this site here. And if it worked, we should now get this wonderful communication site. So this is I think a very nice sample to show you how you can integrate such automation accounts, how you can integrate your PowerShell scripts into existing workflow or new workflows here. And also we have, we see what's the current status here, we see errors, we see properties, and so on. So let's go back to our other script here. Let's see how this is doing here. Okay, it says it's completed. So actually we should also see the project 15, which we created with that quota. Let me search again. Oh, project 20, yeah. It was project 20, so it's already also completed. Cool, so you can do more or less whatever you want with PowerShell in the automation account as well. And you can benefit from the credentials that are stored in a secure way here in the automation account. And you see it's very easy to use such tasks in the automation account. Okay, with that, let's have a look at other tasks. Of course, you can also use the team PowerShells. I have integrated the modules here as well. So there's somewhere in Microsoft Teams PowerShell integrated. You can do it very easily by adding a module if you would upload your own one, or you can browse the gallery and simply say, I want to integrate, let's say, cognitive services. Don't know if there's something existing for that. Yeah, for example, you can also use such libraries or modules from the PowerShell gallery or Microsoft Teams, for example. Also have a look what version it is. So if you say, I want to add it to import this here, there might be some dependencies. So you need to add the dependencies first. For example, the graph authentication library is one of the things most of the Microsoft modules here need. So which would be that one here. So again, always ensure that you have the latest version in your Azure Automation account. Again, the benefit here is that you have one central location. This central location here gives you the environment to create, update, and manage your own scripts. So I think this is really beneficial instead of installing a server, taking care that the right models are installed there, that you have the latest version of that you have the right environment, that you have a credential stored in a secure way, and so on. Okay, talking about scripts here, you can create your own scripts, and there's also a gallery here. So you can browse that as well. And you can see there are a lot of scripts here. You can say, I want to have only things made by Microsoft, for example, or made from the community. So let's virtual machine, for example. I'm sure there's a bunch of scripts you can already use and say, okay, I want to schedule a virtual machine shutdown startup, or I want to create a virtual machine using PowerShell. How would this look like? So you can click on that and then you get the PowerShell code and see, okay, it's also using the Azure RM modules here. And this is how I could create this virtual machine here. We would simply say import, give that thing a name here. And once you have done that, you can start customizing this script here. Good, with that, let's go back to our runbook. So we should now have this new Azure Virtual Machine PowerShell runbook. Okay, one thing that's also important, how do you know if there errors happen? So we saw that there's a history for every script here. So again, let's go to our great communication sites here. And you can see, okay, there are some jobs that have failed in the past for whatever reason. So how do I get notified if something happens here? In that run here that happened at a specific time here, something went wrong, but I'm not sure what it was. So how can I take care of these errors here? How do I get a notification for that? Well, you can use the diagnostic settings for an automation account and create a log analytics workspace for that. What I have done here, so you can see there's a log analytics workspace added. In my case, the name is Global Log Analytics, Global Azure Log Analytics, and you can go into that account here and go to the logs and analyze the data that has been added to that storage account. And I really would recommend to do that, to say I add my own log analytics to my automation accounts to see what is happening in here. And here you can see example queries, and one of the example queries, for example, are the automation accounts. I'm interested in that. You could also log other data like from app services, certificates, key vaults, and so on to that same log analytics storage. But in my case, I'm interested in the automation account events that happened. And you can see there are some sample queries here, like failed operations or exceptions causing request failures and so on. So in my case, I'm interested in failed jobs. So I think this one here. So I can simply click on run here. And then you get a sample query saying, okay, Azure Diagnostics, where the resource provider is Microsoft Automation, and the category is job logs. And I'm interested in the result type, failed, stopped, or suspended. I'm only interested in the things that didn't work properly. And then you see the result here already because I did run it. And here you can see, okay, there has been a failure for this script here, A5 create communication site. And this is what happened here. And I can see, okay, this script happened with status failed here. And then I can have a look at the job with that ID, for example. So this is what you get more or less out of the box. Of course, the logging also costs a little bit of money for the storage that is consumed, but in my opinion, it's really worth it. Of course, you can also save these queries here and say, okay, this is my failed jobs of my automation accounts. This is my category, and we now have this made permanently available, so I can load it anytime from, I think here, the menu here with the large resolution is a little bit small here, but you get these things here. And what you also can do here, you can send notifications. So if a script failed, you say, I want to create a new alert rule out of that script here. And then you can see it's already in here with that connection here, whenever the average custom logs is greater than. And it also gives you a price estimate. What does it cost to notify you? And say, if I have an error in a specific time frame and it occurred at specific times, if there are more than 0 errors, then please create an alert for that. And you need to create an action group for that and say, okay, I want to do an action group here. And this action group has a name like email. And I put it in a resource group like Global Azure here, and I say send email, and I configure that I want to get, I could also call another automation runbook, for example, but in my case, I want to send an email to a specific email address. So you would simply configure that here and say that goes to my company, maybe something like support or error or something like this. And then you have the possibility to create that action group here, that alert here, I think email 1. So now I can save it. And I can now add a severity and an alert rule name for that and so on. So you get an email every time when errors occur. You can see it's a very flexible system. So we can use this, our own requests, our own queries for the storage account to get information what went wrong in the automation accounts here. Okay, so actually this is what I wanted to show you here with the automation accounts of my Global Azure One automation account here. So we have the runbooks, you can configure them as you need. You can store the data with the diagnostic settings here. You can have alerts for metric settings and so on. So you have a very cool environment you can configure, and it's a very easy way to more or less migrate your existing PowerShell scripts to automation accounts. So with that, I just wanted to do a very short recap here. We are seeing how we can use the automation accounts, how we can create them, how we can work with the scripts, how we can update and add modules. We can secure our credentials within the automation accounts. Again, you also can use Key Vault if you want, but you have to access that Key Vault with the secrets you store in the automation account secrets as well. We are seeing how we can integrate the automation accounts with webhooks or with scheduled tasks. So we have integrated that in the Logic app that creates our communication SharePoint site. We could also do the same for creating a new team or doing anything else, or starting a virtual machine, creating a virtual machine, and so on. And we have seen the log analytics, how we can monitor our automation accounts, our scripts, and how alerting works so that you get notified when something went wrong in your automation account. We have seen the permissions that are created when you create such a new Azure Automation Accounts. This is just a summary here, how such a workflow would look like. And here's just my backup slide for the log analytics, how you can integrate it. So that would be the query you could use for getting a notification whenever something went wrong. If something failed or has been stopped or suspended. So this is more or less what you get, and you can continue to work with that data here. Okay, my last point here is that you have, if you work with an Azure Automation account, of course, you need an Azure subscriptions. You get 500 free minutes runtime per month when you with that automation account with that subscription. After that, after these 500 minutes are consumed, you see the costs are very, very small. They're only less than 0.2 cents per minute. So you can run a lot of scripts in that time here. Okay, so this is my summary here. Plan your scripts. If you want to migrate your scripts to Azure Automation Accounts, do it as I showed you here with using the credentials, using the variables to simplify them, to have them stored in a secured way. You can also use the deployment method when you, for example, commit your changes to a repository and then bind that repository to the Azure Automation account, which is a very cool way to do your deployment. It's also always a good idea to test your scripts before you run them in the productive environment, especially with the permissions you need. And developing for the cloud, in our case with the automation accounts, actually is very easy. This is the easiest way to migrate your PowerShell scripts to Azure. The second part would be to use Azure Functions. Azure Functions are a little bit a different concept. It allows you to fan out very well. So if you have let's say, a script that says, I want to get all the users of my tenant, and I have 10,000 users in my tenant, and then I want to get the mailbox data and the last login of every user. So that would be time consuming. So such scenarios could be managed with Azure Functions as well. So you can more or less decide for which scenario, which technology is a good approach. From my perspective, Azure Automation Accounts is really the best way to start with. And it works for, let's say, 95% of PowerShell scripts to let them run in an Azure Automation account. Of course, you can also automate that and create ARM templates and say, I want to deploy my scripts to another Azure Automation account. Okay, here's my last slide with samples and more information. You get the scripts I showed you here on my GitHub repository, github.com, Toni Pohl, that's the first link. And I have a created repository that's called M365VM, which includes all the scripts I showed you today. There's also information how you can integrate the Visual Studio Code extension in your Azure Automation accounts. to make it very easy to deploy your scripts to an automation account. With that, I'm at the end. Thanks for your interest. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat window or contact me via Twitter. I hope it was useful. Thanks for your time and have a nice rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Toni. That was a great session. We have one question. I'm not sure if you're able to see your end, but I can read it out to you because we're nearly out of time.
Yes,
the question is, can you only use Azure Automation Accounts on Azure virtual machines, or can you also perform actions on Azure hybrid domain joined machines?
Yes, that's a very good question. You can also run your automation accounts in hybrid environments. So hybrid environments can be part of the automation accounts. You can integrate them. I haven't played around with that a lot, but it's possible. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm sorry to say, but I think we're very much out of time. So once again, thank you, Toni, for taking your time out and presenting the session. And I also want to thank the attendees as well for taking their time out. And hopefully you took lots away from Toni's session. And to all of you, enjoy the rest of the conference. And if you get a chance, please do check out the community zone through m365virtualmarathon.com. Thank you all.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.